So let's talk a little bit about plugins and skills today. This is not like hot off the press kind of stuff, but it is something that's relatively new, like in the past 9 months, and it's really important. And when I'm out in the world teaching people stuff, there's still just a big gap here. So like a lot of our webinars, I'm going to try to explain why it matters, talk through some of the data and research that we have, and I'm going to show you how we do things here. And I think that will be interesting to folks, and then we'll answer any questions that people have. So let me share my screen and get this going. So so in our business today, we can run a prompt that looks at all of the sessions, AI sessions, from the users across our team, whether they've done that in Claude Code or Claude Cowork, Codex, all right? And we can see all of the skills that we have installed in our business, and with this prompt, we can do two things. One, we can look at things that people are using AI for where they're not using skills, because we can see in that session, did a skill activate, which one, right? So we can find opportunities where people could be using skills, all right? And interestingly, we can also find opportunities where they're doing some work where we do have a matching skill, but for whatever reason, the skill didn't get turned on in that session. So we covered OTel logging a few weeks ago, and that is something you can turn on inside these tools that gives you that kind of visibility into what's going on across people's logging. So we're going to tie that back in to today's work. The idea behind skills is that, prompt engineering, that has been so top of mind for a lot of people over the last 3 or 4 years, and increasingly we don't talk a lot about prompting when we teach. Prompting is like, in that conversation you're having with AI, I think the idea behind prompt engineering is you needed to craft this kind of perfect prompt to get the right result. And so you'd go online and be like, this is the ultimate prompt for personal finance, right? And that was fun, and it actually was helpful, right? But prompting in that way is tricky, right? We got to teach everybody in the company to write extremely detailed and well put together prompts to do their work, and that turned out to be kind of a no-go. Like, people weren't gonna do that in a way. And so what we transitioned to is a world where prompting is actually not as big of a deal, and what we're focused on now is actually teaching the AI how to work. And we do end up with a very intricate prompt, which you'll see is really what a skill is. Instead of written instructions, right, about how to do a thing, but I don't have to go and reuse it every time. I don't have to copy and paste it. I don't, it's captured in this skill, and then anybody can use it. So obviously we don't mean, completely stop prompting. Prompting is the way we interact with these tools, but we're suggesting that the real focus for people should be on teaching the AI how you work. And this is how we transition our work from things where it makes sense for things that we do to a thing that the AI can start doing or can start assisting us with. All right, so that's the headline. All right, a skill is just a set of written instructions for how to do something. Okay, we want the AI to do it our way every time. The models have gotten so smart in the last 6 months that for many tasks, like let's say, we'll look at this one later in our world, we're trying to do expense reporting and help all the people in the company like provide their receipts and do that. The models have gotten so smart that they can kind of figure things out like that. If you were like, hey, go look at all the tools you have access to and go work with everyone in the company to make sure we get their receipts. That's something that AI could do right now, right? Maybe it has tools in Slack or Microsoft Teams to go message people, and it could like get receipts, and it can go look in the system and like maybe your credit card system and see which transactions don't have receipts and all that. It can just kind of figure that stuff out now, but without a lot of instructions, it's going to wander around a lot, right? It's going to try this and that doesn't work, then it's going to try this, okay? And so it can be very inefficient to do that type of work. And it can also be pretty inconsistent. So maybe it works this way this time, but next time it doesn't do it. It misses a step, right? And so if we're looking for more consistency and to have it done more efficiently, that's where skills come in. So that's what I said in the teaser to this class, right? If you're working with AI a lot, wouldn't it be nice if you could get more consistent results and use less of your token allocation, right? And I think companies are interested in that. I mean, that sounds like return on investment. So if we can spend some time to get more consistency and to get it done more cheaply, that's a big deal, all right? So we kind of jokingly refer to this as skill maxing, okay? We're less interested in token maxing, just using as many tokens as you can. For people that aren't using AI enough, we do encourage them to use it more. But once you're using it all the time, we believe the next step in the journey is to focus on skills. Okay. And what we're trying to accomplish here is some sense of compounding. You roll the rock up the hill, and next time you do that work, it hasn't rolled back down. You get to roll it back up, roll it up a little more, roll it up a little more, and over time you can roll it up pretty high. But prompts kind of evaporate in this sense, and skills are things that accumulate. Okay. So this is a big transition for knowledge workers. Robert, who works on our team, is working on some website skills. And when we were talking about getting this set up, he was like, so you want me to take this thing that I've spent years developing some mastery of, and then bundle it up in a way so anyone in the company can do it. Now, Robert is very interested in doing this because he sees much that will help the company. But there is this sense that the skills we've created as knowledge workers are like ours, like what's in between our two ears, and like the judgment we can bring and our knowledge about how to do a thing in a subject matter is a lot of our value. So it feels weird to package that all up and hand it out. If you think back to medieval guilds, one of the things that guilds did is they protected trade secrets, right? So I'm gonna probably pick a bad example here, but you can imagine like the way a barrel maker makes barrels. And wow, if everyone knew how to make barrels, then everyone can do it. And so the medieval guilds would make sure that the folks in the guild didn't share that knowledge with other people. Probably the best modern day analogy is magicians. Magicians are incredibly secretive. They share things with each other, but they absolutely will not reveal how they do their tricks to the average person. So in a large part of work, craft used to live in just one person's hands. And for a lot of work, that's changed. I mean, you can go on the internet and kind of learn how to do things. And increasingly, knowledge work is going to not live in one person's hands or head, all right? Companies of the future are going to have that work disseminated more widely, and not just in a generic way, in a very specific way for how work gets done in the company, okay? And so big breakthrough, right, for humans was writing, you know, the apprenticeship model, and that kind of oral knowledge, history of things, right, gave way to people to write things down. And we actually have that now. And you've heard me talk about documentation a lot on these calls. Like, if you've been around work at all, you know, people don't document things. And it's like clear to me why people wouldn't. It was just generally not a good investment. You would write something down. Basically, you'd stop doing valuable work so you could write something down, and then no one would ever read it. And because it took so much time to do, it would get stale very quickly, so it wasn't really worth reading anyway. And so largely things inside companies are just very, very poorly documented. Okay, we can write down procedures, but it mostly hasn't been happening. And I think the ROI on documentation has just totally changed. And you'll see as we go through this and I show you some practical examples, if you just do your work with AI, like you say, hey, let's learn how to collect receipts and expense reports from people in the company, and you just have that conversation with Claude, for example, and talk through it all and connect to the systems and look at the data, right? You are effectively teaching it how you do that as you go. And the move is at the end of that conversation to say, well, you know, I'm going to be doing this pretty regularly, so can we turn this into a skill? All right. So when you go back to that first prompt at the call, at the beginning of this call, right, we were showing that skill that could go look into our login at Caravan and identify opportunities to use skills that already exist or to create new ones. I mean, one of them is, you know, Michael on our team has created a set of sales skills, right? And one of them is, what do I do after a call, right? And, you know, that's like go into Granola and get the transcript, like flag any action items, put them in our system, make sure these things are updated in HubSpot, right? And the skill goes through and does all those things, all right? And we can go look at that skill in a little while if y'all want, all right? There's nothing really magical in it, right? These are just all the things that Michael would do after a call. But now AI can, he can invite AI into that situation and it can help, all right? So like a lot of the things that we are teaching right now, it is just folders and files, okay? A skill is a folder. We'll look at the structure of it in a bit. The only thing that has to be in there is this skill.md file, just a markdown file, a simple text file, right, that explains everything that needs to be done. And a skill is a piece of software. I'm really pushing this idea with a lot of conviction, right? It is a piece of software. It is just not written in Python. It's not written in JavaScript. It's just written in human language, you know, for us, English, okay? And so they're very easy to read and inspect, okay? And a lot more can go into a skill than just this skill.md file, but this is the only required piece, all right? So we'll look at it in a bit. I don't know how that slide got in there. That's not really one I care about. Okay, so there are kind of three pieces to this that go together to make it work. And I'm going to start in the middle, right? So in Claude or in ChatGPT, you can connect to systems, right? So let's say we connect to our accounting system, okay? Those are connectors, MCP servers, APIs, however you do that, right? You can connect to a system. The reality is, though, that AI doesn't really quite know what to do in those systems. Again, it's very smart and it can figure out a lot of things. But to get the most value out of a connector, we want to put a skill with a connector so it understands what is in this system related to us specifically, our company, right? And what are the types of things we want it to do in that system, okay? And then, of course, there is the model itself, which sits on top of this and figures it all out. So big change in the last 12 months, right? If you opened any of these tools 12 months ago, there were not connectors, all right? People kind of forget that at the beginning of last summer, these systems didn't really connect anything, okay? That was like a new innovation last summer. Skills didn't exist, so that's why prompt engineering was existing. I mean, people were making money selling prompts, And you'll see today people are making money selling skills now. That's where that's transitioned to. And the models, weren't nearly as smart 12 months ago. So when you sit someone down in a classroom and you teach them semi-autonomous agentic AI tooling, everything has gotten better across this entire stack. The model's much smarter. We can actually connect to our systems, and we have skills. Okay, so a lot of what people are experiencing is these top two artifacts paired up with a really strong model, and most people haven't experienced that yet. And when you do, it feels pretty cool. Okay. So, in the post-call experience, right, you get off a sales call, right? There's a world where you say, hey, I just got off this call, like draft the follow-up, pull the action items, okay? It will figure that out, okay? That's a big change from 6 months ago. Like, it will produce a reasonably good request when you do that, but there's absolutely no guarantee that if you did it the next day, it would do it the same way, okay? Versus, here's the post-call skill. Go to HubSpot, go to Granola, draft the email, all these things. You know what's going to happen, and it happens the same way every time. All right. So a couple weeks ago, a group called Skillbench put together this data, and I think it's fascinating. And the key takeaway here is that a small model with a skill outperforms a large model without a skill. So they picked, 100 different tasks, right? They, created evaluations for all of them. What does good look like? And they had the different models do the tasks, sort of naked without a skill, right? And then they built a good skill, and then they had it do the same thing with the skill. And that's what you're seeing here. So here's Haiku, okay? So here's Haiku with a skill right here. That's their smallest model. And by the way, Haiku is it's not a very smart model, okay? You would be very frustrated using it to do your day-to-day work. Opus is, on the other hand, is a very smart model, and you would be very satisfied with what it was doing. But it turns out if you use Haiku with a skill, it's more effective at that task than if you use Opus without a skill, okay? And so that was super interesting. So if your company is spending $30,000 a month on AI tokens, and you're like, what can we do to get this, get our costs down? You can imagine a world where you went from 10% of your sessions using skills to 80% of your sessions using skills. And you moved some of your work to Sonnet, you moved some of it all the way down to Haiku, and you got the same results. And you can imagine cutting your bill by 80% in that world. I think that's absolutely possible today. So that's pretty cool. One thing that showed up in this data too, this little shaded bar right here, is what happened when they had the AI system create the skill. So they had a particular thing they wanted to get done, right? And they just said, hey, in the example we've been using, hey, Claude, could you just create a skill for like a post-call skill that I can use after a sales call, right? And they sort of just didn't give it too much instruction and asked it to help with that. And it built a skill. It turns out that skill that the AI system creates with that kind of limited information is pretty generic and didn't help with the specific types of tasks that they were working on. So this is like a lot of stuff in AI right now. AI will produce the first version of it for you very quickly. It'll get you like 0 to 80% almost immediately. And then getting from 80% to 100%, like building something that's really useful, requires quite a bit of work, okay? So the idea is if you're gonna spend an hour on something, previously you might spend the whole hour trying to write down how this stuff worked. Now you can spend the first 5 minutes getting the first draft done. You can spend the next 55 minutes making it good, okay? But when you hear me talk about evals with skills, that's really the question of, does this thing work as it intended? Does it actually help us solve the goal? And we'll look at a little bit of that, okay? I had never seen this data before. I sort of intuitively knew this, but I think it's fascinating. All right, so I'm gonna hop off of here for a second, and I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. And I'm curious if anybody has any questions at this point before I get into the next little bit, or if there's just some some burning thing on your mind that you want to hear about today. I will make a little bit of space for that right now. And I don't have Jeopardy music to play, but I would if I could. If you have a question in the minute, just put it up there when it comes to mind. All right, and we're going to dive back in. Share screen. Share the whole screen. Yes, great. All right, cool. All right. So the best part of this for me, okay, is that AI is very helpful in getting the first draft of the skill done, which I've said. But more importantly than that, AI is really useful in helping us identify where to build or use skills. Okay? So we have this missing skills report. It uses our OpenTelemetry. It looks at every prompt. It sees if there were skills activated during those sessions, right? There's some Python script that takes all that data and tries to do some matching, and it's looking for opportunities where we could use a skill, but we don't have one that would help with that, and we need to build one, or where we could use a skill we have, but for whatever reason it didn't fire. Okay, and that's incredibly useful information. So right now at Caravan, I think we're pretty forward in using skills, but only 20% of our sessions use a skill. Okay, which I thought when I looked at, I thought that's a pretty low number. So it's of course different across the team. For me, that number's getting closer to 50%. All right. And so we have a goal as a team of getting that number to 50% for the whole team. All right. Not every piece of work you do with AI is work that would use a skill. Okay. We recognize that. But we want to be at least 50%. We think half the work we're doing is repeatable things, right, that we think AI should be able to help us with. Okay. And so that's very cool. You can't really do that at a deep level without the OTel data. You just don't have enough granular information about what people are actually doing. So you could probably hack it out, right? Because let's say you're in Claude Code can see previous conversations that you've had. It can see plans that you've made. It can see a lot of the telemetry for you. But of course it can't see across the team. So there might be some things that you can do on your own in Claude or Codex to try to pull some of this information out. One thing that's really fascinating to me is this idea that a junior person shows up at the company and they get productive much faster than in the past, right? So if we have skills, let's take a particular, the finance function in our business. If we have skills around everything we do for finance, and someone could sit down on day one and get the finance plugin, and it would have all these skills in there. It would have the connectors to all the systems that we care about. And right away they could sit down and say, how do I do expense reports, right? And it could just tell them, right? That is wildly interesting, I think. And I think it would be a great experience for people that are starting in a company. So just something to keep in mind. We're in a competitive job market. How cool would it be if that was how you got onboarded into a role? Okay. So we run 91 skills across 16 plugins at Caravan. That's a very uneven distribution. Some of those are used every day. Some of those are experimental things, right, that don't get used a lot. we encourage people to create and publish skills into the marketplace, and we'll look at our marketplace in a minute. Some of those things get a lot of traction. Some of them don't ever get used, and we probably have some cleanup to do in that regard. But this is a thing we like to joke about, which is, you've heard that this meeting could have been an email. And with skills, you can imagine a world where this company could have been a markdown file. Right? Extrapolate a couple years in the future, right? Every piece of work that's done in front of a computer has a skill associated with it that's really dialed in. AI has access to the systems, the same systems you use. You can imagine now how a lot of work that humans are doing gets shifted over to the AI. And we're going to get to choose, I hope, like where humans are in the loop and what are the things that we reserve for humans that only we can do. But unfortunately, there are many companies right now that could just be a markdown file. But I wouldn't think about it at the company level, and I wouldn't think about it as your whole job. Like, your whole job couldn't be a markdown file, but there's certainly many tasks that you do that could be. And when we do training, this is how we spend a significant portion of the day, right? How do you decompose your role into a series of tasks? And how do you start teaching AI about some of those tasks in a way that it can pick it up and start trying to do them? And we tell people, when you build a skill, well, let me say it a different way. If I hired someone to do a role and I wrote down how to do it and I gave them the instructions, what are the chances that they're going to do it just right, exactly right, the way we want it the first time? And of course, the answer is 0. There's no chance, right? We didn't communicate very well what we wanted. We communicated very well what we wanted, but we don't know really what we want until we see it. There's all these different ways that it's hard to delegate. And so teaching AI how to use a skill, frankly, it's very similar to the way we might delegate something to a human and teach humans. It requires a lot of feedback and a lot of iteration, okay? So where we start in class is sort of just this atomic unit of you're going to build your first skill on a particular small task that you've done. You're not going to worry about helping other people initially. There's sort of this, what's in it for me? Like, here's the thing I do regularly that I want to make better. The next thing we do is we get people, this when we're in organizations, we don't do this in a public class, but in an organization, we'll get them a plugin marketplace stood up, and we will teach people how they can publish a skill to the marketplace. All right. So that anyone could use it. And that's step 2. And then there's this idea of a plugin, right? And a plugin is just like a basket that we can put lots of stuff in. So a plugin can have lots of different skills in it. So you'll see when we look at our stuff in a minute, we have a Caravan training plugin. It has all the skills related to how we do training. All right. But this requires making clear standards. And Nate Jones, who's someone I try to keep up with, he produces a voluminous amount of stuff, but he says people don't have standards, they have preferences they enforce inconsistently. Okay, which I think is right. I mean, that's not other people, I'm talking about myself here too. This forces us to make things explicit. Okay, so what I would hope people are able to do for themselves and for their company is to install a plugin marketplace, and all of the plugins for the company are in there, and people can access them. And on day one, you walk into your team and you can sit down with Claude or Codex, any one of these tools, and say, how do things work around here? All right. And when people come to you and say, hey, like I need you to help us with expense reporting, that if there is a skill that you're using it, and not just using it, but you're contributing to making it better, and if there's not a skill, you're building one. And So much of the value of AI right now is going to accrue to people, teams, and organizations that know how to do this well. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how this works at Caravan. Let me come over here, stop sharing just for a second. Yeah, bundling skills into plugins and best way to keep those current and Git. Yeah, absolutely. I just want to check in and see what questions people had, but let's get right back in it. Thank you, Jake. So this is Skillbench, okay? And I think it's worth clicking around on this a little bit and reading it, okay? As far as I know, I mean, I'm sure there's been some other work here, but to me, this is the best work that's been done on trying to quantify the values of skills. There's some really interesting findings in here, like skills didn't uniformly help across all types of work. There were types of work where they were more or less helpful, okay? You can imagine taking skillsbench.ai, the URL, and giving it to your AI of choice. I mean, while we're here, let's just do it. Part of this is just the fun being able to work in this class. So teach me what this means for our business. Okay, and we will ask. And we're going to keep going, but we'll come back to this in a minute, and we will see what Claude code hooked up for us. Okay, so that's Skillsbench. Particularly, right, here's the paper that they wrote. All right, here's this very interesting graph that we looked at earlier. Okay, I cannot read academic papers. I'm not saying I can't, but the writing style is very painful for me. But there are many papers that I feel like I need to read, so you can imagine me often taking them to Claude and asking for help, sort of breaking them down, which has been helpful. Okay, so the idea of a skill was something that the team at Anthropic cooked up. And good news, this format has been picked up by OpenAI, it's been picked up by Google, it's been picked up by the other labs. So when we are in class teaching people how to build a skill, if they decide, hey, that's great, we did this in Claude, but I want to go and take this and go use it in ChatGPT, that works. That works pretty great. And so I just want you to understand the pieces of what's in a skill. So remember, it's just a markdown file. It's a very simple text file. And at the top of each one, there is a name. What's the name of the skill? And there's a description. Okay? And the description matters a lot. When we're working in, let's use Claude Cowork as an example. We can hit / and we can go find a skill and we can use it. Okay? And so there's a skill in there, let's say, for like reviewing a legal contract. So if we knew we were going to be reviewing a legal contract, we could do / review contract and give it the contract and do all that. What Anthropic is trying to do with skills, okay, is to make them automatically discoverable. And so what Claude Cowork has access to is this description right here for all of the skills that you have installed. And anytime you're doing something, it's looking at all those skills and it's asking itself, is there a skill here that I could use for this work? And so you can imagine being in a conversation and saying, hey, could you review this contract for me? And without asking for the skill, right, Claude is going to go see that there is one for that role and pick it up and use it. Now, when that happens in Cowork, it's visible, right? You can see that it chose to use a skill, all right? But the idea is that you can install a bunch of skills across the company. People don't even have to know they exist, right? Claude knows they exist, and Claude has some sense of what you're working on in that conversation, and it can bring them to the party. A good one would be like brand guidelines, right? Can you imagine if anytime anyone was producing a document or a presentation, if we applied the correct brand guidelines to that thing in an effortless way, all right? So we shouldn't have to say / brand guidelines. Claude should help us realize that that's what's going on and automatically apply it. All right, so we call this the front matter. You may hear that word used a lot. Okay. The second part is the actual instructions themselves. All right. And so this is the basic part of a skill. You got the front matter, you have the instructions. Now remember, a skill is a folder that has this skill.md file in it, but that folder can have tons of other stuff in it, okay? So here's the example they use. It's a PDF skill, and it has the skill.md file, which tells it what to do, okay? But it also has a folder called scripts with a bunch of Python scripts in it, right? So some of the instructions might be, hey, step 3, I actually want you to run this script and do this thing. I see people with folders full of examples. So imagine you have a brand guidelines skill. There may be a folder with a PowerPoint that's, your PowerPoint template. You can imagine the same thing with a Word document, or it can look at an example so it sort of deeply understands what it's doing. So the skill format here is highly flexible, customizable, right, and extendable. The only thing you have to have is the skill.md. That's it. Okay. So, same kind of thing here. If you're like, I want to learn about this, we could come over to cowork, or let's just go into chat here, like upgrading to enterprise. I can't believe they asked me that. Teach me about skills. All right. So if you're new to this, all right, and you want to learn, there are some documentation gaps with Claude and with the other tools too. But giving it the docs and asking to teach you is a wonderful place to start. Okay. So while it's doing that, I'm curious where we ended up over here. So we asked it to teach me what this means for our business with Skillbench AI, right? Before I explain anything in your own words, what do you think an agent skill is? Okay, this is interesting, okay, but I want you to see what happened here. This was not planned, okay, but I have a skill that I have in here called Teach Me. All right, this is a great example of how this works, okay? So this is how I have instructed Claude to teach me things when I'm asking to learn. So I didn't ask for it by name, but it sort of picked up, oh, this is a teaching thing. Okay, great, I'll teach it properly. All right, and so that's what it's doing, okay? And it's very interesting, the Teach Me tool. It goes and creates a checklist of things it thinks I need to learn. It walks me through the checklist. It makes sure I've mastered all the things, okay? So this was a unexpectedly great demo in this regard, okay? That's hilarious. All right, but you can give the documentation around skills to Claude and you can get taught, all right? So here's our plugins marketplace, and there's a little bit of technical work to do here, but again, it's all things that you can ask Claude for help setting up. I was with a client on Monday, and we did this during the day. During training, I had a completely non-technical person who's their administrator, walk through the steps to get this set up. All right. The short version of this is for people in your organization to contribute to the plugin marketplace, they need to have GitHub accounts. They really need to have the GitHub CLI installed on their computer. And if you're like, I don't know what that means, well, just go ask Claude. Okay. But what this allows you to do is, if we come down to our plugins folder, here is, let's see, we talked about sales skills earlier, right? Here's the sales skills plugin that Michael on our team maintains. And you can see that there's some language in here around how this works with Claude and how it works with Codex as well. And here's the skills, right? So here's the post call skill. How do we do this? And look what's in here. It's a skill.md file. And if we open it up, right, here's exactly how it works, right? Make sure we're connected to all these systems. Make sure you get all the right context for what was going on. Pull the meeting notes from Granola, all right? So Michael built this, and he is constantly improving it as he uses it, which is very interesting. So we have a Slack channel called Plugins, and anytime anyone on the team makes an update to a skill, it pushes that information in there and it shows what changed and what happened. So it's very visible to everybody in the company what's going on, okay? So a plugin marketplace is this, like, it's in GitHub, which feels a little bit technical, all right? But Claude understands how to use one of these things, right? And so what you can do is in your Claude MD file, you tell it, hey, here's where our marketplace is, and I'm going to be shipping and improving skills there. And so I want you to encourage me when I'm working to reflect on the work I'm doing and whether it could improve a skill we have or whether we could build a new skill, okay? You don't build these right the first time, right? You sort of get them close and then you improve, all right? So that's an example of one skill that we have. Here's another one that Brandon made around receipt processing, right? So we need to, certain expenses need to have receipts. Here's how it all works, right? Like here's all the different partners, and you know, we need to be able to read images that are attached to emails and look at those receipts. We need to chase them down every day, okay? There's lots of information in here as well, okay, about how that works. All right. So having that all in GitHub is great, but GitHub feels pretty technical to me, and it's easy enough to have Claude push new changes up there and work with it, but when we try to understand the skills we have, we've synced that whole thing up with Notion, okay? So in Notion, we kind of have this all laid out. Here's the marketplace that we have, and within that marketplace is a bunch of plugins, all right? So here are the ones I own, right? Here's our Caravan training plugin, right? So you can see, if I clicked on the GitHub link, there it would be, but you can kind of see what's going on in here and how it works. And then we use this word components to stand for a skill, a hook, an MCP, all these different things that can be in a plugin. I mean, today we're talking about skills, but if you went into the Caravan training plugin, you see there's just lots of skills in here, right? And that can be simple stuff like, how do I add somebody to our roster? Oh, that's interesting. Where's this one? That would be worth checking. That didn't get updated correctly. Yeah, we rolled that skill into a different one, and that did not. That change never went through. But I know this one's true because I use this one a lot. What do I do after a training? Well, I've got to add people to Slack and send them a Net Promoter Score email. I also need to send the email to the trainers to get their scores and feedback. I need to send a thank you email and all this kind of stuff. So again, this is how we do that, right? And if it's not obvious yet, I need to make sure this is very clear. No one comes in here and writes this from scratch, all right? We're at the point where AI knows enough about our business. It can like read our emails and see what's going on in Slack. It can see what changed in HubSpot, you know, all of this stuff, where when we need to write a skill for the first time, the AI is not starting from zero, okay? It knows a lot about how things work. And I think for our company, right, you saw in that Skillbench data where if the AI just wrote the skill itself, it wasn't that different than if it didn't have a skill. I would venture a guess that that's probably different for our business, because that first version of the skill it writes has a ton of context about how we do that specific thing, okay? So we have put all of this in Notion so it's easier for us to see. And if you were with us for the last webinar where we talked about managed agents, you know, when we come in here and let's see if there's a version of this in here. So, right, so when I see, right, here we go. For a training, I need to send the trainer, let's open this up. No, not that, sorry. Yeah, here it is. So, nope, I don't want to look at that one. I want to look at this one, right? Yeah, here we go. So when I want to send, after a training, if I want to send the trainer and the guide, the MPS survey, you can see if we scroll down here that, I hope it's on here. Yeah. which components do we use to do this? Unfortunately, it's not written down in here, but we would use the post-training communication skill for this. So when the agent goes and tries to do this, it is picking up the skill that we've attached to it, and it goes and tries to work on it. Okay. So I am going to pause there. Okay. And I am curious what questions people have about plugins and skills. Jake, to your question about the best way to keep these things up to date, the thing I've been playing around with a lot, which we didn't use at all for a long time, or at least we didn't use it very well, were hooks. And so there is a hook that runs at the end of my sessions now, which asks two things. One, did something happen in this conversation that really should update a skill? And then the second thing, which is similar, right? Is there anything that happened in here that should update our documentation, right? So maybe we did ship a change to a skill, right? And that got handled. But hey, look, we have some documentation over here about how we use OpenClaw. And I looked at that documentation, I looked at this conversation, and you need to make sure that this gets updated over here. So a hook is just a thing that happens programmatically anytime certain events happen. So one of those events would be like the end of a conversation, essentially. And that's proved, I just started doing the documentation skill earlier this week, and that's proved to be very effective in keeping our, it doesn't automatically update the documentation, but just creating that awareness, right, that something has changed in your business and now this documentation over here is incorrect. So, because not all documentation is skills, by the way, but skills are one very important piece of documentation. So that's all I got today. And I appreciate y'all being with me. I'll publish this to YouTube on Monday. Yes, great, Chris. Sarah, how are you guys approaching data privacy? Oh yeah, Claude has access to a lot of our systems. So I'm less concerned about, well, it depends on how we define privacy, right? I'm unconcerned with the things we have shared through Claude, sort of being involved in their training data or that kind of privacy. I'm not worried about that, right? I'm not worried about Claude reading things from systems that we have. I'm unconcerned about that. I am concerned about the parts of our tooling where Claude can go and do things. And by do things, I mean send an email. I'm not worried that Claude can send a Slack message to other people on my team, right? I am worried about the moments where Claude can go and change something in a system. Right? You've heard like the horror stories like, AI deleted our database. Okay, so the read-only things don't bother me. A lot of the internal system things don't bother me. In my mind, as soon as, if it became obvious to the world that data that you shared with Claude was getting shared with other people, then Anthropic would just go out of business, And it's the same kind of trade we've made with like Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, or whatever. A lot of sensitive data is in there. Your photos are in iCloud or Google Photos or whatever. And we feel comfortable that data in a data center isn't going to be shared with other people. So I'm less concerned about that kind of data privacy. But these systems are powerful because they can go and do things in the world. That is exciting because they can be more helpful. But in the same way, when you delegate something to a person, all of a sudden that person can go and do things. Can be a little scary. So how do we mitigate it? Our OTel logging that we've implemented, we can see every tool call. So let's say we had a policy that was like, we don't want AI automatically sending emails. And that was the rule we had. But you can draft an email, but it can't send it. We don't have that rule. Like, I do have AI send emails on my behalf. But if we did have that rule, right, we can see every single tool call that happens, all right? So we could, be running a little thing every 30 minutes that said, hey, Austin tried to have AI automatically send an email. We could see that. We could see, hey, like, Austin didn't have AI try to do that, but the system did try to automatically send an email. So a lot of security today, like cybersecurity, is built around just really good logging, meaning when something happens or as a threat is evolving, the cybersecurity professionals can see what's going on. They can see all the network traffic. They can see emails. They can see all these pieces. And it's that kind of visibility, right, that helps them mitigate issues and then understand what happened when bad things do happen so that they can fix it and it doesn't happen next time. So that's our take, is to create as much visibility as you can. But as far as Claude having access to all of our stuff, I mean, I think we've already kind of made that trade a little bit. Like, Google has access to all of our stuff. Microsoft has access to all of our stuff. I don't see this being fundamentally different. But that's my 2 cents. Everyone needs to make up their own mind about that stuff.